Various issues regarding the prohibitions of Hajj and Umrah. 61. Breaking an animal's leg. Breaking a bird's wing so that it cannot fly. Breaking a bird's egg for a person in IHRAM. These acts are equivalent to killing that animal or bird. 62. Cutting an animal's feathers or hair, or cutting or breaking one of its limbs or organ in a way that does not prevent it from escaping requires the payment of charity equivalent to the amount of the resulting loss in the animal's value. If the animal recovers from such an injury, no penalty is required. 63. If an animal hunted by a person in IHRAM dies of natural causes, a penalty is still required because taking possession of the animal is considered to be killing it. 64. It is also prohibited for a person in IHRAM to purchase hunted game because that animal is not considered property of value to the person in IHRAM. However, a person not in IHRAM may eat the meat of an animal hunted outside the harem either for themselves or for a person in IHRAM without their order, and so can the person in IHRAM. 65. A person in IHRAM may slaughter and eat domestic animals such as chickens and sheep, which by their nature do not flee or be scared. However, if they slaughter wild animals known as land game, neither they nor others may eat the meat. This is because such animals are considered dead, having been slaughtered without the Bismillah. You may not hunt seabirds either, because they are essentially land animals. Killing them is punishable by law. 66. According to two imams, game killed within the harem area is considered dead without the Bismillah. If the person in IHRAM who killed it eats its meat, they must seek forgiveness. According to Imam Azam, if one eats its meat after paying the penalty, one must give the value of the amount eaten as charity. 67. Shooting and killing game within the harem area. Just as it is prohibited to do sulfur monoxide within the harem, it is also prohibited for anyone inside the harem to shoot and kill game outside the harem. Both of these acts are haram because game within the harem is protected. Anyone inside the harem is also prohibited from throwing anything at game outside the harem. 6. Hunting game animals within the harem area Mecca. Pulling up the green grass that grows naturally, or cutting down and removing living trees that have grown naturally is not permitted not only for those in IHRAM, but also for those who are not. Therefore, for the people of Mecca who have not entered IHRAM, hunting, pulling up, or cutting down these plants requires paying their value by giving it as charity to the poor. In return, fasting like a Murim, one in IHRAM, is not sufficient. This is because performing these actions constitutes a debt owed by the Mecca resident who is not in IHRAM. It is not an atonement. It is also a sin for someone not in IHRAM to guide or assist in such an act. However, this action does not require them to pay a penalty for the debt incurred. 69. It is not permissible to graze animals or cut wild grass in the harem area. However, there is nitrogen monoxide objection to cutting and gathering the grass known as izir, Mecca hay, and mushrooms. Furthermore, just as it is permissible to cut down dry trees or break off a broken branch from a tree, it is also permissible to cut and gather cultivated crops and vegetables. At the same time, it is permissible to cut down trees that belong to the same species as those cultivated by humans but have grown spontaneously. However, cutting down trees that are not of a species cultivated by humans but have grown spontaneously is punishable. If several people cut down such a tree together, only one penalty is required for all of them. That penalty consists of paying the value of the tree. 70. If several people in IHRAM were to kill a game animal, according to Imam Azam, each of them would be subject to a full penalty. According to Imam Shafi, only a single penalty is required for all of them. Similarly, only a single penalty is required for those not in IHRAM who kill a game animal within the harem area of Mecca. 71. If the types and circumstances of the crimes committed by a person are the same, a single punishment is sufficient. However, if the types of punishments and the places where the crimes were committed differ, The number of punishments will vary accordingly. Example, a person in IHRAM who without any necessity applies a fragrant substance to a few parts of their body or organ without necessity, or if they cut the nails of one hand or one foot, or both hands and both feet, one dem, the sacrifice of one sheep, is sufficient for all of them. If he cuts 2 or 3 fingers of one hand or one foot, he must give a fitra amount of charity for each nail, if the value of these is equivalent to the value of a sacrifice. The person in IHRAM may give as much charity as they wish in the form of defective items. Furthermore, if, after cutting the 5 nails of one hand, one intends to cut the 5 nails of the other hand in the same session before paying the expiation, a single dem, the sacrifice of one sheep is sufficient. However, if he cuts the nails of his hands and has his head shaved in a single session or in separate sessions, and also applies a fragrant substance to one of his limbs, a separate sacrifice is required for each of these prohibitions he has committed. This is because, just as the nature of the prohibitions has changed, sulfur monoxide too has the state of IHRAM. 72. If a person in IHRAM, due to an excuse such as illness, wears a sewn garment during the day for a period of time and removes it at night, one sacrifice is sufficient as a penalty for this. However, if, after this illness has passed, they wear such a sewn garment again due to another illness, an additional sacrifice is required for this as well. 73. If a woman in IHRAM applies henna to her hands, she must offer a sacrifice. If men dye their beards with henna, however, they must give charity, not offer a sacrifice. 74. Before standing at Arafat, if a person engages in physical contact with a family member from the front or back that would require ritual bathing ghusl, the Hajj is invalidated, and as a penalty, the person must make up the Hajj the following year. However, this invalidated Hajj is not left incomplete but is completed. Sacrifice must also be made due to the prohibited act committed. According to Imam Shafi, a single animal such as a camel or CO must be sacrificed. 75. If a husband and wife who have entered IHRAM for Hajj engage in sexual relations before standing at Arafat, both are punished in the same manner. Each must sacrifice a sheep the following year. When they enter IHRAM, they must separate from one another, travel by separate routes to Arafat, and make up for their invalid Hajj. When there is a fear of intimacy between them, it is recommended that they walk separately in this manner. 76. Looking with lust, kissing, caressing, or engaging in sexual intercourse without following one of the 2 permitted methods does not invalidate the Hajj, even if semen is ejaculated. If semen is omitted, it requires the sacrifice of an animal as a penalty. Nothing is required due to nocturnal emission idlam. That occurs during sleep. 77. If a person who has entered IHRAM for Umrah engages in sexual intercourse before completing the 4 circuits, shaft of the Tawaf, their Umrah is invalidated. However, they may continue to complete this Umrah and offer a sheep as a sacrifice as penance. Then they must make up for this. Invalidated Umrah as a vasib. Sexual intercourse occurs after the 4 circuits of Tawaf. The Umrah is not invalidated. However, a sacrifice must be made. 78a. Person in IHRAM may kill harmful creatures such as crows, kites, scorpions, snakes, mice, flies, ants, fleas, ticks, bees, lizards, butterflies that are not of the hunting variety and do not originate from the human body, as well as a dog that attacks them or any predatory animal such as a wolf, which is inherently vicious, does not incur a penalty. 79. If a person in IHRAM were to shoot and kill many game animals with the intention of exiting IHRAM, only a dem, sacrificing a sheep as a penalty, is required. This is because the act was performed not with the intention of committing murder, but with the intention of terminating the IHRAM. 80. A person in IHRAM is not required to release a bird in a cage near them or a game animal in their home. This is because such an act is not considered an attack on the game animal. According to Imam Shafi, such animals must be released. Because keeping game on one's property constitutes an attack on it,